Welcome to Hi-Fi. I'm Marcos, this is Kurt, and today's a special episode where we're going to be sharing our experience and mini reviews of the Montreal Audio Show.
I'm really glad after 2 years to finally back at the Montreal show. This show means a lot to me because way back in the early 2000s, that's when I first got into the distribution side of high-end audio. And the experience going to that first show, I will never forget. Just to be part of the audio industry at that time, the show will always have a place in my heart. And it's funny, because now, fast forward 20 years later, all you guys who are now my industry friends now, I remember all those side eyes saying, who's this new guy on the block trying to distribute some products out of Europe.
Going around the show, of course, there was a lot to listen to and a lot to look at. So much nice, shiny stuff. The first system that stood out for us was an audio note system. It was pretty interesting. When I first walked into that room, they had this pretty huge enclosure around it. And the first thing I noticed right off the hop was the speakers were at a 45-degree almost angle, which is the first time I've ever seen a system set up like that. What did you think about that setup, Kurt?
Yeah, it's definitely unusual. I did talk to one of the representatives at Audio Note, and one thing he told me, they did it because they had a fairly large sized room and they wanted to reinforce the bass. So they built kind of like a false wall pretty much. And that way, because the speakers, the way they have it designed, in their mind was to produce things in normal living room applications. And if they were just to bring it out into the room and not kind of create that room within a room, they said just they wouldn't have any bass. But what was still kind of interesting was, the fact that literally if you were to draw a line, the speakers are pointed like way directly across right in front of you. Yeah.
I was actually pretty impressed on how this system sounded. And the way they had the room set up, they had a nice couch in the middle, and I actually got to spend some time in the couch listening in kind of like the hot spot of the room. I found that system imaged quite beautifully. It was, even with that crazy amount of tilt and everything on the speakers, it imaged really nicely. It had this nice big presentation to it. And yeah, whatever they did, the bass was definitely there, especially out of such a smallish speaker. It was definitely present in that room.
What they wanted to accomplish with the bass, they did a really good job, especially with, you're right, with the speakers that size. Just overall, the tone and the presentation of the sound, I really enjoyed in this room. It was like everything was quite dynamic, and it just had that really refined ease of listen to that kind of sound where really I could have sat there all day and listened without any kind of fatigue at all. The imaging seemed really good because everything was quite spacious. What I would really have tried, I wish they ran some vocal tracks when I was around. That way, with the vocals, I would really be able to see how they were able to mix and space things. However, overall, this was a really good room.
So a little rundown on that audio note setup. It's around a $25,000 setup, including the speakers and everything we've listened to in that room. The speakers were the Audio Note AN-E speakers. They're around $9,250 Canadian. The amplifier was the Audio Note Cobra integrated amplifier, rated at 27 watts per channel at $7,000. And then the turntable I listened to mostly when I was listening to that system was the TT1, Audio Note TT1 turntable, and spec the way we saw it at the show was around $5,650 without a cartridge. For our second mini review, we listened to the new KLH Model 3s. A funny story with this setup is when we first arrived on Thursday in Montreal, there was a impromptu event almost with the president of KLH, and he actually ran us through what he's planning to do with the company. David Kelly is the president. He spent over 25 years with Klipsch, and then he retired and he got bored, and he ran us through the story on how his wife almost choked him for buying KLH, but he was really excited about getting into this new project. David actually spent that evening running us through all the new projects that KLH is coming, and it sounds like they've got a lot of cool stuff coming up.
Some of those models that I don't even know if we're allowed to discuss them. It's been a long time since I've been that excited of another game plan for the future and what they might release. I think it's pretty exciting stuff and a revamp from that company. And I would just thank Lily at Multi Distribution, the one that distributes KLH, and just thank you for listening in that seminar and that presentation that they had. It gave us a really good insight in with their path, and again, like I said, I am very excited for that brand.
Yeah, the funniest part after that event, and after we learned all this cool new stuff about KLH, they ended up needing a couple of guys to move those speakers, and of course, here we are. So we ended up setting them up in the listening room.
Yeah, I carry the stands. That's the heavy part, right?
Once the show got started, we got to listen to the Model 3s. At first, we weren't overly impressed, but maybe it was because of the room, or there were so many people in this little room trying to listen in.
Yeah, it's true. I would say the first impression wasn't the greatest impression. I wish, right, it was busy. I was way off axis on the side there. They have things across the long wall, which is not bad to set things up that way, and it can work. I don't think it was the greatest impression. The thing is, though, we did go back, and that's when things changed.
When we returned on the last day of the show, luckily it wasn't as busy in that room when we went back, and we got to listen to them for a little bit longer. And that's where they started to shine a little bit. Maybe they got to break in some more. It wasn't as noisy, so they actually had a really nice bass presence, a nice open, airy top end, much like the Model 5s actually. The new KLH Model 3s are an upcoming speaker, and we're pretty lucky to listen to the first pair in North America. They'll be retailing around 2,800 Canadian or 2,000 USD, and follow closely because we will be getting our first pair shortly. The next room we went into, and my jaw just dropped. Of course, it was a PMC Accuphase room. Now, this is definitely a reference system around $300,000, containing PMC MB2s, Accuphase A250 power amps, the C390 or 3900, preamp, and the DC1000 DAC, also featuring a Lumen P1 streamer. This system absolutely blew my head off. I loved it right from the get-go. And the more I listened to it, the better it got. I found the bass response was absolutely amazing. The Accuphase just controlled those PMCs perfectly.
For me, this was one of my favorite sounding rooms at the show. Just going over my notes here. One thing is, yes, they're playing some piano on there. Now, the thing is, what I find with most PMCs, especially in their reference stuff, and whether I hear them in studios or maybe some of the versions before at customers' places, it's always the piano. To get the right weight on the piano is so difficult, but this system absolutely nailed it. One thing I've noticed, of course, the bass extension. The bass extension in those speakers, like most PMCs, extend really well. But it's not just the extension, it's the quality of the bass. It's so dynamic and authoritative. You know, it really just creates just an awesome experience. And I remember we also listened to a little bit of Dominic Fills with her. The drums, again, were just like on point. To create that much body from the initial hit to the attack, just to sum it up, that was awesome. Another thing that I noticed too is usually on her voice, when she says, there's a part where she kind of goes like, huh, like she kind of, they kind of mix it in the back there. Usually it's quite faint. Well, I've heard it before, but not with that much presence. So one thing is, I just say that it is a very expensive system, and a lot of people say, "Oh, is it worth?" But sometimes it's those little things that are important to some people, being at that kind of price range. I'm not saying go out and spend that kind of money. There are those little things, again, that makes a big difference to some people.
As you can probably tell already, I spent a little bit more time in this room than the others at the show, and one of the reasons why is because one of the engineers from PMC was actually at the show. And I ended up talking to him quite a bit, just having some fun nerd out time, asking him all kinds of dumb questions. And one of those, which he had a pretty good laugh, was one of my favorite PMCs at the moment is the Fact 8. And I was like, did you ever take the drivers of that and put it in a really little bookshelf? As you can tell, I love little bookshelves. And he just chuckled and he was like, yeah, we did, and it didn't work whatsoever. And I was like, well, that's too bad. But it was definitely a good time in the PMC room. Thanks for watching our video today. We've got many more mini reviews of the show coming up. We had a great time in Montreal, and we want to share our experience with you. Please like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends, and we'll see you in the next one.